privilege to be here once again with you to commemorate, to remember, to never forget. I want to thank the Knights of Vartan on this, the 96th anniversary of the commemoration of the Armenian Genocide, for making this event a constant in history so that we join together, so that we also never forget. To their eminences, to your chairman, to all who have joined together, to all of the representatives of the Mid-Atlantic Lodges, to my colleague who just left, Senator Schumer, to my friend and colleague in the House, Frank Pallone. We are here to keep victims of genocide in our hearts and in our prayers, to honestly represent historical facts, to never forget the horror and suffering after 96 years. That is not something reserved for one commemoration every year. It is our obligation as citizens of the world to remember it every day. As I have said before, whether 96 years or 196 years, we must vow to never forget, as we vow never to let it happen again. And we must keep the victims of genocide, no matter where it occurs, in our thoughts, in our prayers, and constantly vigilant for the world to remember. Now, as a member of the Senate Foreign Relations, I have said that American diplomacy must avoid the euphemisms, the wink-wink, the nod-nod of foreign policy that overlooks heinous atrocities wherever they are committed around the world. To overlook human suffering is not who we are as a people. It is not what we stand for as a nation. We are better than that, and our foreign policy should always reflect that goodness. And that is why it is imperative that the President of the United States, of my own party, recognize that this was a genocide and call it as such. Genocide is defined in Article 2 of the Genocide Convention as, quote, acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. And that's certainly what happened to the Armenians. Today is a solemn day of remembrance of the genocide that began in 1915. It is our commitment to honor the memory of those who perished. And let us make it perfectly clear, certainly for me, as I have pressed those who have come before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for nominations, there is one important point that I always ask them. Do you recognize that what happened from 1915 to 1923 was genocide by definition and by all that is human? There is no other word for it, there is no other euphemism for it, and there is no avoiding it. And so as part of this commemoration, we must seek acknowledgement of the truth from Turkey and from our own government. Our State Department and our diplomats going back in time to that era have well documented the fact that this was a genocide. And today, no present diplomat should be constrained in acknowledging the historical record that was developed by their own predecessors. It was and should be referred to as the Armenian Genocide, plain and simple, and we must commemorate it as such as both a nation and our diplomats abroad. So, I know that you have for a long time worked very hard to have our country and the world recognize what is just. Despite the fact that we have not fully achieved our goal, despite whatever geopolitical pressures they may ask us to bend like a willow in the breeze, let us be like an oak, tall and strong, firmly rooted in the truth of history that cannot be denied. I promise you that for so long as I continue to be a United States Senator sitting on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, that any nominee who comes before the committee having anything to do with Armenia will have to answer the question, do you recognize the Armenian Genocide? And I will continue to push, as I have held up nominees in the past. I will continue to push the people who we have in place around the world, who represent the United States, to recognize the horrific events of 1915 as a genocide. And I will continue to push to make sure that the United States reflects a deep sense of moral outrage with respect to the Armenian genocide. I close as I always have, because I think it was one of the worst, most heinous comments that was ever made. But when Adolf Hitler was being pressed about what he was doing to the Jewish people, he said, I shouldn't worry. Look at the Armenians. Who remembers the Armenians? Well, we here today remember the Armenians. We remember the survivors. We remember the history, and we will continue to remember the history and speak truth to power until the United States of America says to its own citizens, yes, there was a genocide, and yes, we will call it as such, and yes, we will show the moral outrage that we should as a country. That is the greatness of America. It is a greatness we are going to fight to make true and a reality to the Armenian genocide. Thank you very much. May God bless the United States, and may God bless Armenia.